The wind howled outside, sharp and cold, like claws scratching across the steel walls of the housing tower. Isara was not a friendly world. Snowstorms came without warning. Power flickered often. And for a young woman living alone, peace was hard to find. Lyra sat curled on her bunk, wrapped in a thermal blanket. Her fingers hovered over the screen of her holopad. She reread the ad one last time before posting it. Looking for roommate. Quiet, clean, responsible. No males. No exceptions. She hit post with a sigh. It wasn't about hate, it was about safety, about control. The last time she shared space with a male, she never wanted to repeat it. She had her reasons, and no, one would change her mind. Rent had doubled since the new dome construction. Her savings were nearly gone. She needed help, or she'd be out in the snow before winter ended her first breath. 3 days passed. One insectoid replied, then a silent drone, then a lizard-like female who demanded the whole kitchen. Lyra almost gave up. Then came the buzzer, BZZZCT. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her hand went to the stun baton near her bed. Cautiously, she tapped the door console. The camera blinked to life. Her heart nearly stopped. Standing at her door was a human male, shirtless. No less. Snow dusted his dark hair. His build was lean but strong, his skin pale from the cold. And steam rose from his body as if he had walked through fire to reach her. He smiled as if this was normal. He said, breath visible in the freezing. "Air, I saw your ad." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "The one that says no males?" He gave a small shrug and pointed to the bag over his shoulder. "Didn't think I'd make it this far, but I need a place. Just for tonight. I can fix things, heating, plumbing, power. Name's Callan." "I don't care what your name is," she said coldly. He didn't flinch. "You will if your generator dies." She blinked. Right then, as if the universe enjoyed proving his point, the lights flickered and went out. Her breath fogged instantly. The heater cut off. The room's warmth faded like sand slipping through fingers. "No," she whispered. Tapping her console again, it was dead. Backup generator, offline. Outside, the snow thickened. No repair drones would fly through that. The temperature would drop below survivable in less than an hour. She looked at the man again. Still standing there, still shirtless, still calm. He didn't beg. He didn't push. He simply waited. Lyra cursed under her breath. Her pride didn't matter right now. Her rules didn't matter. Not with frostbite knocking at her door. Just the entry room, she snapped. "And keep your hands to yourself." Callan gave a light nod and stepped inside. The cold followed him like a ghost. The entry room was barely 6 feet by 6. A cracked wall unit still held a flicker of heat. Lyra activated her emergency coil, and warmth began to hum barely enough for two. She handed him a blanket, avoiding his eyes. "Sit there, against the wall." He obeyed. Minutes passed in silence. She watched him from the corner of her eye. His lips were slightly blue, but he didn't complain. Instead, he opened his toolkit and began checking the control panel near the door. "What are you doing?" she asked, tense. "Running diagnostics. I can reroute some of your power from the rooftop solar. Not a fix, but it'll give us 3 hours of heat." She blinked. "You can do that?" He smirked, eyes tired but clever. "I said, I fix things." Lyra wrapped her blanket tighter. She hated how calm he was. How confident. She wanted to scream at him, throw him back into the storm, but part of her deep inside felt safer than she had in weeks. "Why no males?" he asked softly, not looking up. She stiffened. "That's not your concern." He nodded once. Fair more silence. Then suddenly the power hummed back. Just one room, just one light, but it worked. "You." "Did it?" she whispered. "Told you?" Time passed. The storm grew louder outside. The little room grew warmer inside. Lyra was half asleep when she realized. He was shivering. His body pressed against the wall, bare arms wrapped in a thin blanket. The heat coil didn't reach him. She looked away, But then his voice came quiet, not begging, not bold. "I'll stay awake if that makes you feel safe. I just don't want to freeze." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached over and pulled his blanket slightly closer to the heater's path. Their fingers brushed. She pulled back instantly. He smiled just a little. She scowled. But as the fire burned low and the cold crept closer, Lyra realized something terrifying. She would need to let him sleep closer if either of them wanted to survive the night. And he knew it. Because when she glanced at him again, he was already looking at her hand. He whispered, "We're both trapped now." The morning light was pale and cold as it crept through the frosted window, casting dim lines across the cramped room. Lyra's eyes opened slowly, the warmth beside her unmistakable. She hadn't meant to fall asleep that close to him, but survival had left no room for pride. She'd awoken sometime during the night to her body trembling, and his was the only source of heat nearby. The blanket had shifted in the night, and now part of his bare shoulder touched her arm. She moved, slightly. He didn't. Still asleep. Calm, breathing slow. For a moment, she just watched him. There was something strange about his face, too soft for someone who claimed to be a stranded tech. His body, though lean, was shaped like someone who had fought and survived worse places than Isira. She knew what military men looked like. He wasn't wearing any marks, no tattoos, no dog tags. But he didn't feel harmless. Still, he hadn't done anything wrong. Not yet. Lyra slowly got up and wrapped her blanket tight around her shoulders. The heater was still humming low, thanks to his repairs. She tapped the control panel. Power was back, but weak. Just enough for water and one hot meal. He stirred behind her. "You always watch people while they sleep?" he said, voice rough with sleep. She turned sharply. "You should be thanking me for not throwing you out." "I would. But then I'd have to remind you that your heat's working because of me." He sat up, still shirtless. His breath fogged in the cold air. He gave a half smile, then rubbed his neck like he was used to waking up sore. There was a quiet between them. Now not awkward silence, but something thinner, tighter. Lyra didn't like it. It felt like a thread could snap if either one of them said the wrong thing. She went to the food dispenser, punched in a code for 2 emergency meals, and waited. One steaming bowl dropped out, then another. She set one down in front of him and walked back to her side without saying a word. Callan looked at the bowl. "You know, this is the nicest thing anyone's done for me in months." She ignored him. He chuckled to himself, eating in silence. After a minute, he set the empty bowl aside and started digging through his toolkit again. "What now?" she asked. "Your heat relay's cracked. Might be able to stabilize it if you let me use your inner wall access." Lyra hesitated. That meant letting him into the back corridor behind her quarters. A private space no one else had ever entered. "Why are you really here?" she asked. He looked up. "You're not just some poor repair tech, are you? You walk through a blizzard shirtless, and you're on a planet nobody comes to unless they're hiding?" He stared at her for a long time, then said, "You're right." He didn't say more. Lyra's pulse quickened. She rose to her feet and gripped the stun baton. "You should leave." He didn't flinch. Instead, he calmly closed the lid of his toolkit and stood. "I'm not here to hurt you, Lyra. If I were, I would have done it last night. Or when your systems went down. Or when you slept so close to me I could hear your heartbeat." Her grip tightened on the baton. "I ran from something," he said. "Not because I'm a criminal, because I didn't want to be their weapon. I used to work for a private corp, Black Core Systems. Ever heard of them?" Lyra's eyes narrowed. She had. Everyone had. Black Core was banned from several sectors for experimenting on unwilling soldiers. Rumors said they created hybrid humans, controlled minds. "War machines? Why you?" she asked. He shrugged. "I tested too well. Reflexes, gene scores, resistance. They thought I was perfect." "You escaped, barely. They're still looking?" "For me, and you came here? No one looks for runaways on a dying ice moon," he said with a faint smirk. "Especially not inside the apartment of an alien woman who hates men." She didn't respond to that. Callan bent and slowly picked up his bag. "I'll go. Thanks for the heater and for not letting me freeze. But as he walked to the door, the lights flickered again. Then they shut off completely. Not just in the room, but across the whole block. The emergency alarm buzzed. Lyra ran to the console. Red text flashed across it. System breach, central tower compromised. Security incoming. She stared at it, jaw tight. This wasn't a power failure. It was a raid. Callan's expression darkened as he looked over her shoulder. They found me. How? She whispered. Trackers. Must have reactivated when I fixed your power. Damn it. Footsteps echoed in the stairwell just beyond her door. Heavy boots. Multiple pairs. Lyra turned to him. Her voice was low and tight. Do you have a weapon? He shook his head. Just tools. She hesitated. Her hand trembled as she reached under the bunk. Pulling out an old ion pistol, dusty, but charged, she tossed it to him. Then you better fix something else now, she said coldly, because they're not just here for you. She watched the fear in his eyes shift into something sharper. He nodded once, and outside, someone pounded on the metal door 3 hard knocks. Then silence. The knock came again, louder this time, sharp enough to rattle the frame. Lyra's pulse raced. Her apartment had never been visited by outsiders before, not even the usual maintenance bots. Now someone or something was on the other side of her door, and they weren't being polite. Callan had already moved without needing a signal. He slid beside the doorway, out of sight, gripping the old ion pistol she'd tossed him. His breathing was steady, almost too steady, and that frightened her more than the knocking. It was the kind of calm that came from someone used to being hunted. Lyra tapped her console. The door camera was down, so were all other feeds. Nothing. But static. The security system had been wiped. Total blackout. The third knock came not with knuckles, but the heavy clang of metal. Whoever was out there now had a tool, or a weapon. Is there another way out? Callan asked quietly, not looking at her. Lyra hesitated, then nodded once. Maintenance tunnel. Behind the heat coils, it leads to the lower ducts. Big enough for 2? Barely. They didn't have much time. She crossed the room and crouched at the back wall, pulling away a panel near the floor. Behind it, a narrow tunnel stretched into blackness, barely shoulder width. Lyra had used it once, years ago, during a station-wide lockdown drill. She never thought she'd have to use it for real. Go, she said, looking back at him. But Callan was still by the door, listening. They're not breaking in, he murmured. They're waiting. For what? She asked. For me too. Run, he replied. A pause. Then he added, they want me scared. Lyra crawled into the tunnel first, her knees scraping against the cold metal. Callan followed behind, the entrance sealed behind them with a magnetic strip he jammed into place. The tunnel was pitch dark. But Lyra knew the path by memory. Left, then down, then a sharp right. The ducts narrowed after the first turn. I could feel his breath behind her. Close. Too close. The heat of him made the air feel heavier. You okay? He whispered behind her. I'm not talking to you, she hissed. And I'll fix it, he whispered back. They reached a vertical shaft. She climbed first, gripping the rungs with freezing fingers. The metal burned with cold. Callan climbed after her, his footsteps nearly silent. He moved like a shadow. Number 2 number. Complaints. No wasted words at the top. They exited into a service corridor, half-lit, empty. Lyra pressed against the wall, listening. Far below, in her apartment block, she heard the hum of drones. They were inside now. Searching Callen leaned against the wall across from her, chest rising and falling. He didn't look tired, looked angry. How long will they track you? She asked finally. I removed every beacon they implanted in me, he said. Except one. I thought it was just muscle wiring. Turns out it transmits. Where is it? Glanced at his left shoulder. Under the collarbone. Lyra stared. We need to cut it out. He nodded. Do you have a blade? She pulled a small utility knife from her boot. Wasn't made for surgery, but it would do. Callan sat on a crate, took off his jacket, then his shirt. She paused. His body was covered in faint scars. Thin, straight lines like seams across a broken machine. His skin was smooth, but underneath she saw something unnatural. The lines glowed faintly blue beneath his skin wiring. "Nanotech, you're not just human." "Are you?" she whispered. "I used to be," he said. "They changed that." She knelt in front of him. His eyes met hers. "Quick and deep," he said. "Don't hesitate." She didn't. The blade slid in, and he didn't flinch. Blood welled up, dark and thick. Lyra's hands worked fast, fingers trembling as she dug past muscle and something tougher. Then she found it a sliver of black metal embedded just beneath the bone. With a grunt, she pulled it out. Callan hissed, then leaned back. Sweat on his brow, Lyra crushed the device beneath her boot. Sparks flew. "Signal's dead," he said, voice hoarse. Footsteps echoed nearby, real ones this time, not drones. Heavy, fast. Someone was approaching. They couldn't stay here. "We need to move," she said. "Where?" "I know a place." "Sublevel 9. Nobody patrols there." He stood, wincing. Blood still trickled down his side, but he nodded, led the way. They moved quickly through maintenance corridors and broken lifts, through tunnels forgotten by most of the station. Down in the dark, the air grew still. Colder. By the time they reached Sublevel 9, Lyra's fingers were numb. The lights above flickered dim orange. This place was old, unused. Half of the doors were sealed with rusted locks. She opened one. Out. Dust covered the walls. It wasn't much, but it was safe for now. Callan sat heavily, leaning against the wall, blood still seeping through the cloth she'd wrapped around his shoulder. Lyra stood in front of him, watching. "I don't trust you," she said. "Good," he replied. "That might keep us alive." Her eyes narrowed. "You lied to me." "I didn't lie. I just didn't say everything." She turned away, arms crossed. He looked up at her, eyes serious. "You could have left me behind. I still might." But she didn't walk away. Not yet. The room was quiet, but the silence didn't feel safe. It felt like the calm that came just before something went wrong. Dust floated in the dim light, stirred by the low hum of the ancient heater mounted on the wall. Its warmth barely reached the far corners of the chamber, but it was enough to keep the cold from biting too deep. Lyra sat cross-legged across from Callan, her back against the far wall, a ration bar untouched in her hand. She'd been staring at him for nearly 10 minutes, not speaking, not blinking much. Callan didn't say anything either. His shoulder was still bleeding, though less than before. He'd wrapped it tighter, then gone quiet, like he was listening to sounds only he could hear. She hated how comfortable he looked, even injured. Like he belonged here. It's like this wasn't the first time he'd been on the run, hiding in the shadows. "Long have they been hunting you?" she finally asked, voice low. He didn't open his eyes when he answered. "Since the day I said no." "To what?" "To becoming someone else's property." Lyra studied his face. There was pain in his voice, but not fear. Not anymore. He'd burned through that long ago, she realized. Whatever had happened to him, it had changed more than his body. She stood slowly and moved to the wall, pulling aside a dusty crate. Behind it was a hidden panel, one of the old maintenance interfaces that hadn't been used in decades. She brushed away a layer of grime and activated the terminal with her wrist ID. The screen flickered, then lit up. "What is that?" Callan asked, eyes narrowing. "A forgotten relay," she said. "Taps into the old sensor grid. If it's still working." "And you didn't use it before?" "I didn't want anyone to know I knew about it." Callan watched her fingers move across the controls. Series of grainy overhead maps came into view, floor plans of the housing sector, security patrol, routes, atmospheric conditions, and one blinking red dot. The red dot was near her old apartment. Then it moved. Her blood ran cold. "They're still searching." Callan leaned forward. "Only one?" She shook her head. "One tracker. But that doesn't mean it's one person. Could be a drone leading the team." He stood and approached her. "Zoom out," she did. The map widened. The blinking dot was now slowly descending a level. They're tracking movement, he muttered, searching the ducts. Lyra's fingers tightened around the edge of the console. They're going to find this level. Then. We don't wait for them to knock. Before she could reply, a soft noise echoed through the hallway outside. It was barely audible. It's like a low hum rising from the floor itself. They both froze. The heater buzzed, then everything cut out. Darkness swallowed the room. Lyra cursed under her breath. She smacked the side of the terminal, but it was dead. No lights. No sounds. It's just silence. Then dash, clink, something metallic tapped outside the room. Both of them turned to the door at the same time. Another tap. Then a dragging sound. Callan reached into his bag and pulled out a small device flat, round with blinking green lights. He twisted a dial on it and held it toward the door. The lights blinked faster. "What is that?" she asked in a whisper. "Motion." "Reader," he said, "modified for heat signatures, and 3? No, 4 figures. 2 humanoid, 2 smaller. Drones, probably. Duh." The sound came again, closer now. And then a voice, mechanical, inhuman. Unit 03. Confirmed. Biological presence. Extraction order active. Prepare containment. Lyra grabbed her baton. Callan raised the ion pistol. But there was no time to plan, no time to think. A blue light cut through the door, a plasma cutter. They were coming in. Callan grabbed Lyra's wrist and pulled her to the side, into the corner. Where the shadows were thickest, he pressed her against the wall, his body shielding hers. She didn't fight it. She couldn't. The cutter carved faster now, its arc glowing bright against the cold air. The metal hissed as the seal was broken. "They'll flood the room with gas first," he whispered. "We hold breath, then strike." She nodded once, then the door burst open, but instead of drones, a single figure stepped in, tall, humanoid, clad in matte black armor with a featureless mask. Its hand held a long staff-like weapon with flickering ends. Lyra didn't wait. She moved low, sliding across the floor, slamming her baton into the figure's leg. Sparks erupted as the shot connected, but the figure didn't fall. Callan fired. Bolt hit the armored chest, knocking the figure back into the doorway. The weapon clattered to the floor. Another drone zipped in sleek, spider-like. With tiny blades whirry, Lyra crushed it with one kick, sending its pieces scattering. Then silence again. The hallway remained dark. No more movement. For now, Callan stepped over the downed figure and ripped the mask off. What he saw made him recoil. It wasn't a man. It wasn't even truly alive. The face beneath the helmet was synthetic, almost human. In shape, but blank. Artificial. Eyes glowing faintly red. Skin pale like wax. "What is that?" Lyra asked, backing away. Callan stared at it. "That's what they made to replace me." She looked at him, confused. "They weren't just trying to make super soldiers," he said. "They were trying to copy us. But the copies weren't stable, so they used us to learn, and killed the originals afterward." He turned back toward her, his face grim. "That's what's chasing me." Machines wearing flesh, programs wearing faces. Lyra stared down at the thing's empty eyes, and for the first time since he'd arrived, she believed him completely. The room smelled of scorched metal and ozone. Smoke curled from the seams of the destroyed drone, filling the small hideout with a bitter stench. Lyra's hands trembled slightly, the adrenaline still buzzing in her veins. Her baton was cracked, sparks flicking from the edges. And Callan's pistol had overheated after that last shot. The synthetic body lay motionless between them. Its red eyes had finally dimmed. But Lyra couldn't shake the image how human it had looked beneath the mask. Yet how wrong. Its face had been smooth, like molded clay, but hollow in expression. No pain, no fear. Callan stood silently. Over the machine, breathing heavily, blood from his shoulder now soaking through the new bandage she'd made from one of her blankets. He didn't say anything, neither did she. Not for a while. Finally, Lyra broke the silence. "You said they wanted to copy you." Callan didn't look at her. "Yeah." She stepped closer, her boots crunching lightly over the pieces of the spider drone. Why, you? He exhaled, slowly, like he hated the answer, because I was stupid enough to survive everything they threw at me. She studied his face, cut along the cheek, bruised at the jaw, the faint blue glow of something unnatural pulsing beneath his skin again. Not obvious, not visible unless you looked hard. But she saw it now. He wasn't just some soldier who got lucky. He was built or rebuilt for something else. How much of you is still you? She asked softly. He finally looked at her. Enough to be scared. Lyra looked away. That was almost worse than any answer he could have given. Machines didn't feel fear, but he did. She moved to the wall console and tapped it again, trying to reboot the old sensor grid. The screen flickered, then buzzed with static. Callan sat down slowly, groaning as his shoulder throbbed. They're not done. I was a scout. They never send one unit unless they're watching. Through what? She asked. I crushed the tracker. They don't need the tracker, he replied. Not if I used my hands. They can trace movement, heat, pulse, bioenergy. I'm lit up like a beacon. Her eyes narrowed. You fixed my heater. That's how they found us again. He didn't deny it. Lyra turned, crossing her arms tightly over her chest. You were supposed to be laying low, not setting off signals like a flare gun. I didn't want you to freeze, he said. Maybe I should have, she snapped. That landed hard. He looked down, jaw clenched. For once he didn't have a reply. The silence stretched too long. She hated how much she hated saying it. She hated how human he looked when he was quiet. Not like a super soldier, not like a fugitive. Just a man. She sat beside the wall, far from him, knees tucked under her arms. You don't get it, she said. This station was safe. Quiet. I built a life here. Now it's gone, he said. She stared at him. He met her gaze. I know, he continued. Because I had one too. Before they turned me into this. Before they burned everything down just to see what would rise from the ash. He leaned his head back, resting it against the metal wall. I was nobody. A mechanic. Good with tools. Good with machines. That's why they picked me. They said I'd serve better if I could feel less, so they tuned me. Lyra's mouth went dry. Tuned? She asked. He nodded, pulled parts out, put others in, told me I was special. He laughed, bitter and sharp. I was their perfect project. I didn't bleed like others, didn't sleep like others, and I never said no until I did. He turned his face away from her. I left during a system reboot. Half my squad didn't even know I was gone until the lights came back. Lyra didn't respond. What could she say? Every second with him brought more danger. But it also brought something else, a pull she didn't want to name yet. Not trust. Not exactly. But something near it. You should go, she said quietly. I can hide. You can draw them away. He shook his head without hesitation. They know you helped me. You're part of this now. I didn't ask to be. I didn't ask to be made into this, he replied. But we don't always get to choose. She stood. Her hands were shaking again. Then what do we do? Looked up at her, eyes clear, steady. We hit back. She stared at him. You said this place was safe because it was quiet, he continued. What if we make it loud, send a signal they don't expect, jam their channels, trigger overloads? Turn the whole station into a trap. Lyra blinked. That's suicide. Callan gave a faint smile. Only if we fail. Her heart pounded. Her instincts screamed to run, to hide, to go back to being the quiet girl in the Frostworld apartment with the no mail sign on her door. But that girl was already gone. She stepped forward, slowly. I know a way to reach the subgrid. But it's old, buried beneath the reactor tanks. Will it work? It'll work, she said. But you won't like the way down. Callan stood, testing the strength in his legs. That's okay, he said, meeting her eyes. Used to crawling through hell? Lyra didn't smile, but for the first time since this all started, she didn't look away. Asterisk, the stairwell to subgrid access wasn't made for comfort or survival. Every step down groaned beneath Lyra's boots. Rust clung to the metal rails like decay on a corpse. and the walls sweated condensation that froze into glittering frost under the dim light of her wrist beacon. Sarah's core vents were deep underground, far beneath the main housing levels. No one came here unless they had to. She figured even the station itself had forgotten this place existed. Callan followed a step behind. Limping slightly, the pistol in his hand lowered but ready. The bleeding in his shoulder had slowed but not stopped. Didn't complain, didn't. Winds just kept moving. She didn't know if that was because of training or implants. Maybe both. You sure this place still links to the main systems? He asked, voice quiet in the narrow space. She nodded. My father helped design early backups for colonial stations. Said the lowest systems always last the longest. No one bothers to tamper with what they forget. Kellen gave a faint grunt. I like your dad. He's dead. She replied flatly. Silence followed. Just the crunch of their boots and the distant, eerie thrum of the geothermal generators below, they finally reached a sealed door marked with faded text. Subgrid control? Level 6D maintenance crew only. Lyra knelt beside the control panel, wiping away the frost. She pulled a slim tool from her coat pocket and began unlocking the manual bypass. Sparks jumped once, then a hiss. The door opened with a mechanical gasp. Like a long breath held for years, inside was blackness. She entered first. The room smelled of burnt wires and time. Dust danced in the air like tiny spirits. The control console was old, cracked, bent, but intact. A large cable cluster hung above it like a nest of frozen snakes. She turned to Callan. This is it. He stepped beside her, eyes scanning the network interface. We can send a pulse from here. Spike the old relays. It'll trigger every old warning protocol and force the upper levels into lockdown, which gives us, what? 5 minutes before they trace the surge? Maybe 4, he said. Enough to jam their scanners, maybe fry a few of the drones hunting us. Lyra reached into her coat and pulled out a crystalline data drive. This has the old admin key codes. Still unlisted? Still raw? Callan raised an eyebrow. You've been preparing for something like this? No, she said. But I always knew peace wasn't permanent. He accepted the drive and slotted it into the console. The old screen flickered blue, then bright green. Access granted security grid, online reboot permission. Ellen's fingers hovered over the interface. Then he looked at her. If we do this, everything changes. I know. He pressed the command. The entire chamber shivered. Lights crackled overhead. A deep hum vibrated through the floor as old systems awakened like sleeping giants. Alarms that hadn't sounded in decades let out low, angry tones above them far. Above, sirens began to scream. Back on level 3, cameras erupted in static. Patrol drones short-circuited mid-flight. Corridor door slammed shut, trapping units inside. A ripple of electronic confusion spread through the building like a virus. Lyra watched the chaos unfold through the station schematics on the monitor. It's working, she whispered. Callan didn't answer. He was staring at the central feed. Grainy image captured from a remaining hallway camera. A squad of black armored figures was already adapting. One of them turned to face the camera directly. Its face was the same as the synthetic they'd fought before. Only now it smiled. The feed cut. They're learning, he muttered. Fast. Lyra stepped back. Then we have to be faster. Suddenly, a sound echoed from behind them, metal striking metal. Not in the hallway. Inside the walls. They both spun toward the source. Vent shaft, she said. They're crawling in. Callan raised his pistol. We hold the door. We bottleneck. Them, Lyra scanned the console. Her fingers danced fast. No, we lock them in. Callan glanced over. What? She didn't explain. Instead, she accessed an old emergency protocol fire containment locked, designed to trap blazes inside sealed compartments. If she could reroute the commands, she could trap them instead. A fire, the vents behind them hissed open. Callan fired. A drone skittered through, blade-like limbs flailing, eyes glowing white. He shot at midair. It exploded into pieces. Another followed. Then another. Lyra shouted, Now. She hit execute. The room groaned. Thick blast doors slammed shut over the vent entry points just as two more drones were halfway through. The sound of metal crushing echoed as their bodies were caught between slabs of steel. Torn in half, sparks rained, silence followed. Only the whir of the console remained. Callan turned, panting. That was brutal. Efficient, she corrected. He chuckled weakly. We might actually make it out. She walked past him, stopping at the far end of the room, where a ladder descended into darkness. We're not done yet. There's more. She nodded. There's a hidden relay in the geothermal core. Her father said it could transmit a single burst across any open Starlink within 50 light-years, but it only works once. Alan's eyes lit with understanding. A distress signal. Lyra looked back at him. No, she said. A warning. They descended the ladder together into the dark, into the unknown, and toward the only chance they had left. Above them, the false-faced soldiers regrouped. The synthetic with the smile tilted its head toward the ladder shaft, its expression unchanging, and then, quietly, it began to follow. Asterisk, the geothermal shaft roared like a monster buried in the planet's gut. Heat shimmered in the air, rising. From the molten rivers churning far below the grating, the platform Lyra and Callan stood on vibrated with every pulse of the planet's core. Metal trembling like it might crack apart at any second, Lyra wiped the sweat from her brow, blinking. Through the haze, this deep, the cold of Asira had surrendered to ancient Hetra, dangerous, alive. The silence from above hadn't followed them down here. Not yet. Callan crouched beside the old relay housing in oblong structure embedded in the rock wall, covered in warning signs and rusted shielding. His wounded arm trembled slightly as he worked, but his hands didn't stop. The panels creaked open with effort. Exposed wires sparked like angry nerves. This still looks functional, he muttered, but barely. Lyra knelt beside him, pulling out the crystalline drive again. Can it send the burst? He nodded. Yes, but there's no keyboard. This is an old pulse relay. Everything runs off neural interface. She blinked. Neural. It reads thoughts. You can only send one burst, one message. And then it fries itself to prevent interception. His voice tightened. But the interface isn't painless. Lyra stared at him. Let me do it, he said quickly, already reaching for the relay's thin crown of transmitter coils. It's better if I know, she said, voice low but firm. They're hunting you? That message doesn't go out. All this meant nothing. I'll send it, Lyra. She didn't wait. Her hand slammed down onto the interface plate. Sharp crack lit her vision. Pain ripped through her skull like molten glass. Her breath caught her eyes rolled backhand. Then she was inside the signal. She felt it, the universe above. Vast and dark and filled with watching eyes. 1,000 channels, most dead, some flickering with distant echoes. 1. Open, she poured the message into it. Warning from Asira. Black core synthetics are active. They're copying humans. Replacing them. We're still fighting. We need help. Don't trust the face. They wear it like a mask. They're coming. The words weren't said. They were felt, burned into the signal like fire into wood. Then the burst went out, screaming across space like a flare into night, and the relay exploded. Lyra flew backward from the force, landing hard against the wall. Callan caught her before she hit the grating. Her body shook, her nose bleeding. Her fingers twitched like they didn't remember what they were. He held her tight. It went out, she gasped. It worked, he nodded, brushing blood from her lip with a trembling hand. Then they heard the echo. Footsteps above. Not running. Not scrambling. Marching. The synthetics had found them. Callan stood slowly, lifting the pistol. Only one shot left. Maybe two. His other hand grabbed a rusted pipe. Can you move? Asked without looking at her. I can move, she whispered, using the wall to stand. The ladder behind them shook. Dust fell. Then the first mask appeared. That fake face against smooth, pale, smiling. A machine's parody of a human being. Its glowing eyes locked on them. It stepped down. Another followed. Then another. 5 in total. Lyra gripped her broken baton. Callan whispered, "Get behind me." But she didn't move. The synthetics began. Their descent calm, unstoppable, like shadows made solid. Then, sound broke the silence. High-pitched ping, followed by a pulse of light from above. The synthetics paused. Callan blinked. What the hell? Second ping. Then a third. Suddenly, the relay system above them exploded in reverse, overloaded from a return signal. Somebody heard them. The sky above cracked open with sound. The station shook. Then the synthetic at the front twitched. Its mask cracked. Its body froze mid-step. Sparks erupted from its neck. Then the others began seizing, collapsing one by one like puppets with their strings cut. Lyra and Callan watched in stunned silence. A voice rang through the shaft, metallic but real. From a distant speaker, "This is Command Vessel, Sparrow. Signal. Received. Black core activity confirmed. Lockdown breach authorized. All synthetics marked for deletion." Callan lowered his weapon slowly. He exhaled like he hadn't breathed in hours. Lyra turned to him. "You think they'll land?" she asked, barely daring to hope. He smiled. "If they don't, I think we'll survive anyway." They climbed out of the shaft together, limping. Burned, bruised, but alive. Above them, the sky wasn't dark anymore, not silent. Small ships broke through Asera's clouds, sleek and fast, marked with symbols Lyra hadn't seen in years. Old peacekeeper crests, long thought gone. Real humans. Real allies. She and Callan stood in the snow as the first dropships landed near the remains of her ruined apartment block. The cold bit into her skin again, but this time, she didn't feel alone. Callan stood beside her, shirtless as ever, grinning despite everything. Lyra laughed, breath fogging, "Still breaking rules, huh?" she said. He smirked. She said no. Males, not no survivors. She shook her head, and for the first time in her life on this frost-covered world, hunted, hardened, she smiled back, because the signal had gone out, and someone had answered.